Uncharted is a spectacular video game series developed by Naughty Dog and published by Sony. It has permeated almost every form of media it could. Since the release of its first game, Uncharted: Drake's Fortune, it has spawned 3 sequels, a standalone expansion, a prequel, a spin-off game, a board game, comics, and a novel. The only thing missing was film. The games tell a great story, a modern swashbuckling treasure hunting adventure with some supernatural elements. It has some memorable set pieces and characters. They are very cinematic games. In fact, its most common praise is that it feels like you're playing a movie. So obviously it lent itself perfectly to be adapted for the big screen. In 2009, this adaptation was set into motion. 13 years later, and we're finally getting the Uncharted movie. This is how Uncharted went to development hell and back. Uncharted: Drake's Fortune was released in November 2007 for the Sony PlayStation 3. Since then, Sony was looking to make a live-action adaptation. I know I said 2009 was when they got the ball rolling, but the ideas and plans were taking shape much earlier. Love him or hate him, there's no denying Avi Arad is maybe one of the biggest reasons why we have the MCU right now, and he had plans to make an Uncharted movie. His hope was for Uncharted to be for video game movies what Blade, X-Men, and Spider-Man were for comic book movies. At E3 2008, Ari Arad spoke with Kotaku about his plans to bring the video game to the big screen. The best thing about Drake is he's not an archaeologist, he's not a benevolent guy, but he's certainly not a great guy. Indiana Jones was always a good guy and he relentlessly did the right thing. Drake is a guy who's being hauled over to virtue throughout the game. I hope we become one of the premier Hollywood game production studios because we really want to live up to what these guys have created. We want these movies to not only expand the audience of these games, but expand the worlds of these games. It wasn't until June of 2009 that they finally got the ball rolling. Sony-owned Columbia Pictures announced that they were developing a feature film based on the game, to be produced by Avi Arad and Ari Arad for Arad Productions, and Charles Roven and Alex Gardner for Atlas Entertainment. Avi and Ari Arad's previous production work includes all the Spider-Man films as well as other Marvel comic book adaptations. Charles Roven and Alex Gardner's previous production work include the Nolan Batman films and a video game adaptation of Warcraft. They also announced that Kyle Ward will be working on the script. At the time, he had just finished the script for another live-action adaptation to the video game Kane and Lynch, which was set to star Bruce Willis and Jamie Foxx, and as of yet is in development hell itself, if not dead altogether. He had also been hired to write Hitman 2, so he was no stranger to video game adaptations. Unfortunately, it will be the latter that will cost him this writing gig. Sony was not willing to wait up to a year for Kyle Ward to finish writing Hitman 2. Sony instead hired the writing duo of Thomas Dean Donnelly and Joshua Oppenheimer. This duo gave us the adaptations of A Sound of Thunder and Sahara. In May of 2010, David O. Russell, who at the time had previously directed Three Kings and I Heart Huckabees and had awards buzz going for his upcoming release of The Fighter, was the top choice for the director's chair, only to back out in August after he and the producers couldn't come to an agreement. Later in October of 2010, Sony put out a press release stating that David O. Russell will be writing and directing Uncharted: Drake's Fortune. Columbia Pictures president Matt Tolmach commented on the announcement. David is a tremendous choice to take on this film. He's equally adept at combining all the classic elements involved in this property. Great character development, strong comedy, and amazing action sequences. He has a brilliant vision for this material and we know he will bring his original unique voice to this adaptation. A day after the Sony press release, Nathan Fillion started campaigning for the lead role by tweeting this. If ever there was a Twitter campaign, let this be it. Rise ye Browncoats, rise ye Castilians, rise. Linking to this deadline article of the David O. Russell News. He was always a fan favorite casting choice for the role of Nathan Drake, as fans felt he captured the swagger, charisma, and looks of the character. Since the announcement of David O. Russell as the writer-director was made, Mark Wahlberg was rumored to be getting the part of Nathan Drake, as they have had a good working relationship and had worked on 3 films together. Mark Wahlberg confirmed these rumors in a November 2010 interview with MTV. David is one of the best writer-directors I've ever worked with. The idea that he has is just insane, so hopefully we'll be making that movie this summer. In the interview, he also said that Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci were being looked at for roles. I'm obviously in whatever David wants me to do, but the idea of it is so off the charts. De Niro being my father, Pesci being my uncle, it's not going to be the watered down version, that's for sure. In December, after a special screening of The Fighter at the ArcLight Theater in Hollywood, a fan went up to David O. Russell to ask if he'll reconsider Nathan Fillion for the lead role.
Because he looks like that guy?
No, he acts exactly. Because I played every Uncharted game. He acts exactly like that dude. That's all his little subtleties. If you look online, there's thousands of people.
I should
thank you. This is my son. Seriously, dude. I should
thank
you. There's thousands of people online.
All right, people, can we keep it moving, please? It's not a big deal.
Thousands of fans are thinking about it.
All right, I hear you. You stood up for your boy.
David O. Russell didn't seem to know who Nathan Fillion was, and frankly, the whole interaction was very awkward. In a February 2011 interview at IGN, David O. Russell gave a few more details on the movie. It's hard to keep writing in the middle of an Oscar campaign, but I'm almost done with that script, and that's going to be really fantastic. I think if we take that family dynamic that we have in The Fighter and put that in terms of a grander stage with a crime family that metes out justice in the world of art and antiquities. If you're the head of a museum or head of state, you've got to deal with them, and they're badass. They're like The Sopranos in some ways, but they have great taste, and they have a sense of justice. I would love to do that with Mark Wahlberg, Robert De Niro, and a couple of hot women. It could be very thrilling. Here he is in another February interview, this time for the Slash Filmcast podcast, where he was asked about his relationship with the property.
My son plays most of the games in our house, and I will play them with him, but I'm not, hardcore, and I'm not going to present myself as hardcore. But I played the game a bunch of times, and I also read as much as I could about the game, and I met the game creators, Amy Hennig, who's really cool. I kind of started to brew together what I thought could be a really cool idea that I'd never seen in a film before. Really intense action and really intense family dynamics on a global stage. To grow a game into a movie is an interesting proposition because a game is a very different experience than a movie. You guys are playing the game, and it's about playing the game. It's not about a narrative embracing you emotionally. I want to create a world that is worthy of a really great film that people want to watch and rewatch, and so that's what I'm working on right now.
When asked about fan suggestions as to how one should go about making an Uncharted movie, he had this to say.
Well, I've had people come up to me after screenings and pitch people they think should play the roles, and I think that we've seen that before with movies like Interview with the Vampire, where there was a lot of fans of Anne Rice's book and a lot of strong opinions about how to make it.
The December interaction with the fan championing Nathan Fillion was all for naught, as David O. Russell will leave the film in May 2011, citing creative differences. The LA Times reported that Russell had already turned in a script, but it was a script so long and so ambitious that it was at least partly responsible for the studio and him parting ways. Among the many flourishes Russell had added were a bevy of characters not in the video game. Sony was back to square one, but found their new writer-director in July 2011. Limitless director Neil Berger was to write and direct a new script. The studio and producers liked his take on the project, which was more closely tied to the game. Speaking with We Got This Covered, Neil Berger said, "We're rewriting the script from scratch, and I'm just jumping into that literally right now, about to close the deal and leap off. Until the screenplay is written, you never know who's going to be acting in it or not. But there are a lot of good actors out there who even look like Nathan Drake and who could do it. I love the project. I think it's a great adventure and it's a wild, insane ride. The game is and the movie will be. I mean, it has pretty great character at its core. Nathan is a bit of a con man, a hustler, knows his stuff, ballsy. It's great." When asked if he was staying pretty true to the game, he answered, "Absolutely, and then you have to do what a movie does best as well. Build on what's cool about the game and then make it into a movie." A little over a year later, in August 2012, we find out Neil Berger has moved on to another project, and they were bringing in National Treasure writing duo Marianne and Cormac Humberly to rewrite the script. In June 2013, while promoting This Is the End, Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg tell IGN that they've been asked many times to make the Uncharted movie.
They're constantly asking me and Evan to make the Uncharted movie.
For like 4 years now, they've been just like, make an Uncharted movie for us.
Yeah.
But it's just going to be Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
Non-stop.
To write it.
Non-stop.
They've been asking us to write it for years.
Nothing ever came of it as they felt they couldn't make the movie without having it be Indiana Jones. In February 2014, we get word that Horrible Bosses director Seth Gordon will be directing the script by Safe House writer David Guggenheim. While speaking with Zaptuit in July 2014, Seth Gordon was asked when he expected to start shooting the movie. I think very early next year, that's the plan. That's like tomorrow essentially because the prep is so complicated for the movie. On the subject of the Nathan Drake role, he says, I want it to be a good actor, that's number one, and then if it's someone who has an actual jaw, that's even better. In August of that year, they bring in Zero Dark 30 writer Mark Bowl to do a 3-week polish on the script before it begins production. We also learn at this time that Chris Pratt was offered the lead role but turned it down. A hacker group calling themselves Guardians of Peace hacked Sony Pictures in November 2014. They were calling for Sony to withdraw the release of the upcoming Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg film The Interview, about the plot to assassinate North Korea leader Kim Jong-un. The hacker group released lots of sensitive information from the studio, including emails regarding Uncharted. Among the leaked content was the complete 124-page script by David Guggenheim, along with emails containing script revisions, shooting locations, budget, and casting discussions. Concerning the casting, emails show that the studio was still interested in Mark Wahlberg for the lead role, along with Chris Hemsworth and Channing Tatum. This hack was big news at the time. It exposed embarrassing executive email exchanges, trade secrets, and 5 upcoming full-length films. This hack rocked the industry, and in the fallout, nearly all of Sony's top management was swept out, including Sony Pictures chairperson Amy Pascal, who was replaced by Tom Rothman in February 2015. There are conflicting reports saying that Rothman wanted the budget for Uncharted reduced or wanted to head in a whole new direction altogether, which prompted Seth Gordon to leave the film in June of that year. Joe Carnahan, the writer-director of The A-Team and The Grey, was brought on in July 2016 only as the writer. He'd be unable to direct himself due to scheduling, but said to Variety, "In a perfect world, I would love to do both, but right now, I'm only on board to write the script." Of Uncharted, he said, "Archaeology today is in itself an antiquity, but that world has always fascinated me, especially when you go to a museum today and wonder how a piece got there to begin with. Plus, the property itself is so popular that it was hard to turn down an opportunity to work on it." In October, Sean Levy, director of the Night at the Museum movies and Real Steel, was confirmed to be directing the Joe Carnahan script. Sean Levy spoke to Collider. Concerning fans telling him who should play Nathan Drake, he said, "I've been pitched to everyone. God bless you, Twitter, but I made a joke that you're saving me the money of hiring a casting director, Twitter, because from Nikolai Coster-Waldau to Oscar Isaac, Nathan Fillion, Chris Pratt, Chris Evans, Chris Pine, it's every actor who is ruggedly handsome. Eventually, if people keep suggesting ideas and actors, one of them will prove to be true." In January 2017, Joe Carnahan finished writing the script and posted this picture on Instagram. "Done and dusted. Now the real work begins. If there's a more monstrously cool action script in Hollywood right now, I want to read it, cause this thing is a beast." Speaking with ComingSoon.net about the script, he said, "When I wrote Uncharted, I didn't spare the rod. I wrote it the way the video game is. They swear in the game, they're kind of foul-mouthed, and I kept all that stuff intact, and I definitely didn't write it as a PG-13 movie. I wrote it the way that movie should be written. I probably wrote 4 of the biggest fucking craziest action sequences I think I've ever written in that movie. I used the Uncharted games as a template, but not using any one specifically, because those sequences have already been done beautifully." Deadline reported in May 2017 that Tom Rothman, after seeing cuts of Spider-Man Homecoming, decided Tom Holland would be a great fit for Nathan Drake, and that the script will be redrafted as a prequel of sorts to the games. Sean Levy ended up leaving Uncharted in December to work on Free Guy. Tom Holland was still attached to the project, but no word on if the Joe Carnahan script was being used. In January 2019, Dan Trachtenberg, director of 10 Cloverfield Lane, was announced as the director, referencing greatness from small beginnings, a phrase etched in Latin on the ring Nathan Drake wears around his neck. Trachtenberg wrote "small beginnings" to a fan's tweet containing a clip of him from the Totally Rad Show talking about the game and saying how he wanted to direct it.
What do you think, Dan? What do you think of Uncharted?
Okay, so this was my most anticipated game of the year.
Yeah, you were talking about trying to get the rights to make it.
I want to Prince of Persia. I love, in terms of the games, I love that. And in terms of genre of movies, I wish I could make this movie. I think this is as good as many movies. I agree.
In May 2019, Sony announced the creation of PlayStation Productions, a production studio that will mine the company's extensive catalog of video game titles for film and television and oversee all projects. The head of this new production company, Asad Qizilbash, said, "Instead of licensing our IP out to studios, we felt the better approach was for us to develop and produce for ourselves. One, because we're more familiar, but also because we know what the PlayStation community loves." This gave Uncharted 2 new producers from PlayStation Productions. Asad Qizilbash and Carter Swan will be producing alongside Avi Arad, Ari Arad, Chuck Roven, and Alex Gardner. In July, speaking with Games Radar, Dan Trachtenberg comments on the casting of Tom Holland. "I think Tom Holland is a brilliant actor, and the idea of not doing the video game stories, telling the tale that hadn't been told yet, I thought that was a really smart way in." Of the film, he says, "If Naughty Dog chose to make another Uncharted game featuring Nate and Sully, this movie's story is probably the story that they would want to tell." Unfortunately, he leaves the project in August. He jokingly tweets, "Listen, guys, I've been dreaming of making movies since I was 3 years old. And throughout these years, I've been hearing of directors leaving projects over creative differences and wondering what that was about. So I guess what I'm saying is, sometimes dreams do come true." During the news of his departure, we also get news that the duo behind Men in Black International, Transformers The Last Night, and Iron Man, Art Markham and Matt Holloway, alongside Chuck and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. writer Rafe Judkins, will be writing a new script. They will be the final writers, as this is the script that will be made into the film. Travis Knight, director of Bumblebee and Kubo and the Two Strings, joins in September 2019 as director. And in November, we come back full circle with Mark Wahlberg, except this time he's announced to be playing the part of Nathan Drake's mentor, Sully. Just before the year ends, Travis Knight leaves the project due to scheduling conflicts as Tom Holland will be shooting Spider-Man. January 2020, Ruben Fleischer, director of the Zombieland movies and Venom, is at the top of the list to step in and direct Uncharted. In March, we get more casting news. Antonio Banderas, Tati Gabriel, and Sophia Ali joined the cast, and we get confirmation that Ruben Fleischer will be directing. Ruben Fleischer will be the 7th and final director to get the job. Shooting wrapped in October 2020, and the release date was shuffled a few times due to COVID before settling on a February 18 release date. Tom Holland spoke with Total Film just this January about the process of finding the right director. Some of the directors came in and had ideas that we didn't like, that just didn't fit the characters, and we had to move on to other people. We took inspiration from everyone. There were very different variations of Drake, and very different variations of Sully. Some people preferred to make the game, some people wanted to make it completely different to the game. It was an interesting process, one that I wouldn't like to be in again. It's quite stressful looking for a director. Ruben Fleischer had just gotten through shooting Venom and the Zombieland sequel back to back and believes his relationship with the studio helped him get the job. He told Total Film, "I was firing on all cylinders from a production standpoint. I was just really in the rhythm of making movies." It took 13 years, going through 7 directors, multiple writers, and various potential leads, but we're finally getting this long gestating movie. Usually when a movie goes through this type of development hell, the outcome is almost always not good. Avi Arad's hope way back in 2008 was to have Uncharted pave the way for good video game movies. Some might argue that Detective Pikachu or Sonic the Hedgehog already beat him to it. Will Uncharted surpass these in terms of quality, or will it fall short?